Hello, fellow cyborgs, and welcome to another day of a book review extravaganza. Today I'm going to be talking to you about War for the Oaks by Emma Bull, and this is my favorite urban fantasy novel and one of the only ones that have 5 stars given to them, because this extravaganza book review week, in case you weren't aware, is all of my favorite books. So everything I have been talking about and will be talking about or have received 5 stars from me on Goodreads. But before I get any further, book haiku: Suffragette City, Fairy Wars, Friendships Lost, and Urban Done Right. Okay, so I'm hoping that not a lot of you have heard about War for the Oaks. This is one of the surprises this week that I was like, oh, they're gonna be excited to hear about this. So one of the exciting things about War for the Oaks is that this is Emma Bull's debut novel, and it was written in 1987 and was winner of the Locus Award for Best First Novel. You know, a lot of debut novels are niche, right? I haven't read anything else by Emma Bull, though I do have Finder on my Kindle, but poor Kindle. You're going to meet my Kindle sometime soon, because that poor guy, he just needs to be read from more. But in any case, we're here talking about this book, War for the Oaks. So it's a debut novel, and I think it is freaking awesome. So here's the general lowdown. Eddie is a musician in Minneapolis, and one night after a really bad day, she's walking home and finds herself somehow in the middle of a fairy court conflict. The fairy courts are going to be starting a war between each other, and for some reason they need a human. I can't remember if she's like the thing that starts the war off, or if she's somehow like the representing the middle ground intermediary who's unbiased. I can't remember, but she gets roped into this fairy war and gets put under the protection of a puka, which is a fairy, a very dashing gentleman who can turn into the form of a dog. So think like Sirius Black, but without the Azkaban PTSD. Eddie is a modern woman who is a singer, and she might play an instrument, can't remember, in a band, and she doesn't want to be caught up in this fairy crap, and she doesn't want to have someone constantly shadowing her. She's just not a happy camper, but unfortunately she just has to suck it up. So in here you get a really interesting fairy mythology. I believe it's a Seelie and Unseelie court situation, which is really cool. I like it when fairy mythologies include that, because it's, you know, it's part of the fairy tradition. This is one of the books that I think incorporates music into it really, really well. She talks about different band practices that she goes to, and they talk about some of the things that they've done. And I'm not very musical. I don't particularly care for music in books, but in this one, it's just done so well. The way that the music and how they're playing is described, even though I don't understand what it would actually sound like, I can kind of imagine the feeling that it would invoke in me. It just seems so awesome. At one point, they do a cover with Suffragette City by David Bowie with an electric violin, if I remember correct. So, it's good stuff. This also has some sexy times in it, just, you know, just a couple occasions, not overly graphic, but you get sensual and intimate moments, and I really appreciated that in this. So it's definitely an urban fantasy. It's not in the romance, it wouldn't be shelved in the romance genre, but if you like to have a little bit mixed in that with your adventure stories, then this is a really nice place to go. This is also a standalone, which is just my favorite. I'm not a huge fan of series and trilogies, though there have been series and trilogies that I've really adored. I mostly prefer standalones, and the fact that this is so just makes me ever so happy. It's not all a happy camper, fluffy adventure story. There people die in here that you become close to. There's betrayals. The fairies aren't all that nice, you know, as they are wont to do. But it's just a really fun story, really well done from what I can remember. I've reread this once. I've read it twice in total, I think, and I'm definitely due for a reread. This is definitely urban fantasy done really well. I've definitely run up and down the fantasy gamut and trying to find things that were my speed, especially when I wasn't into high fantasy when I was in university. Emma Bull and Charles DeLint were 2 urban fantasy writers that I really got on with, that I thought the the characters and the situations were well done, the writing didn't bug the crap out of me, and was even something that I liked, and yet it was still most definitely urban fantasy. So read this if you are trying to get into urban fantasy or are a fan of urban fantasy and would like a good place to start. Read this if you are interested in fairy stories with kick-ass heroines who have rock bands. And read this if you're just looking for a really nice book. Like, I think this would be probably a good summer read just because it's not terribly long. It's about 315 pages or so. It's pretty fast-paced from what I can remember. It's not terribly dense. It's just a really good book for what it's trying to do. This, War for the Oaks, was an adventure fairy story set in Minneapolis. Just a standalone, good urban fantasy. And this is what this is. It was so completely successful in what it wanted to be. So if any of those reasons sound like something that you would want to do or something that you'd want to pick up, I highly, highly recommend going for War for the Oaks. Thank you for continuing to watch my favorites week of book reviews. I hope that you liked hearing about War for the Oaks. I don't read an awful lot of urban fantasy, but that's one that has stuck around on my shelves through many a book culling process because it's just so dang good. Until next time, I hope you try reading some urban fantasy. I know it's not one of the more celebrated genres on BookTube, but I think you can definitely find some gems in there. And as always, continue to be lovely. You're fantastic.